11 is received.
All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start showing Exhibit 11, and I'm going to let it run for about 15 seconds, and then I'm going to pause it, okay? All right, so if you could do that, please. All right, so I'm going to ask to pause it right here. Now, as I said, other than cutting out the big sign on the right side, does this fairly depict what you were able to see when you looked up at the screens on May 25th of 2020 regarding this incident?
Correct.
And you said when you first saw it, there were no officers. Now we obviously have seen some officers walking into view. Were you still able to watch it when they did walk into view?
I was in and out of this video, so I do not remember them walking to the car.
All right. And what do you remember, seeing the next time that you looked up?
I believe they were getting into the back of the squad car.
And do you remember then the next time that you were able to see it, generally what was depicted?
I believe they were still trying to get into the back of the squad car. It was moving a little bit, and then I went back to my screens.
And I think what I'd like to do is have this run, and if you could just watch the video and tell the jurors, when you were able to look up what parts that you remember seeing that day during your shift, okay?
Okay.
All right.
And then I went back to my screens.
And I think what I'd like to do is have this run, and if you could just watch the video and tell the jurors, when you were able to look up what parts that you remember seeing that day during your shift, okay?
Okay.
All right.
I believe this is close to where I started watching.
And I think what I'd like to do is have this run. You could just watch the video. So obviously you can see some police officers here. Did you recognize them individually?
No. I believe this is close to where I started watching. And then I
Obviously you
know
can see some police
I
officers
didn't
here.
watch that much, and then the next time I looked, they were opening the door. I do remember that.
Okay. Which door do you mean?
The driver's side back seat. This is what I remember seeing.
And so for the record, we see the officers now trying to put Mr. Floyd into the back seat, correct?
Correct.
The timestamp on the top for the record reflects about 8:17 and 10 seconds when you said that approximately.
Yes. This is what I remember seeing.
So for the record, we see the officers now trying to put Mr. Floyd in the backseat.
Correct.
The timestamp on the top, for the record, reflects about 8:17. Now the officers have opened a rear passenger door. Do you remember seeing this part of the video?
Yes. I remember seeing the squad move.
And what do you mean by move?
So like now you can see the squad is moving back and forth.
It's not like being driven, but moving back and forth.
Right.
And for the record now, the timestamp at the top is 8:17:50 approximately.
And I know I wasn't able to watch all of this.
So at some point here, you had to turn
Yes.
away and do your job.
Yeah. Remember seeing
And
the squad
Do you
move?
remember what was the next thing you remember seeing?
The next
What do you
time I remember looking up is they had moved from the back of the squad to the ground.
It's not like being driven. And so when you see that, let me know and we'll just make a reference to it at that time, okay?
Okay. I don't exactly know when they moved to the ground. I just know that when I looked up,
Right.
we were no longer in the back seat. And I know I wasn't able to watch all of this.
So at some point here, you had to turn away and do your job.
Yeah.
And do you remember what was the next thing you remember seeing?
The next time I remember looking up is they had moved from the back of the squad to the ground.
And so when you see that, let me know and we'll just make a reference to it at that time, okay?
Okay. I don't exactly know when they moved to the ground. I just know that when I looked up,
Right.
we were no longer in the back seat. And I know I wasn't able to watch all of this.
At some point here, you had to turn away and do your job.
Yeah.
And remember what was the next thing you remember seeing?
The next
Because you've told us that
I remember looking up.
you remember seeing them on the ground with him. I want you to point out the time in the video that looks familiar to what you remember seeing when you say that you saw them on the ground with him, just so that we know, okay?
Okay. I don't exactly know when they moved to the ground. I just know that when I looked up, we were no longer in the back seat.
Because you've told us that you remember seeing them on the ground with him. I want you to point out the time in the video that looks familiar to what you remember seeing when you say that you saw them on the ground with him, just so that we know, okay? Because you've told us that you remember seeing them on the ground with him. I want you to point out the time in the video that looks familiar to what you remember seeing when you say that you saw them on the ground with him, just so that we know, okay?
I believe this is when I started watching again.
So for the record, the timestamp at the top reflects 8:19:25. So this is what you mean by them having him on the ground.
Correct.
Do you recall how long you were able to watch around this time?
No, honestly, I was in and out of looking at the cameras and then going back to my screens to make sure I wasn't missing anything, added remarks, getting out calls, and then would go back to the screen again.
So this now, is what you mean. And actually, I think what I'll do is just pause it here. Having him on the ground.
Correct.
After seeing this, at some point, then did you look back to the screen?
To back to working?
No, back to this video of the
Yes,
scene.
I was in and out of looking at this screen and then my work. In and out of.
And at some point then, did you go back to this and
to my screens to make sure I was.
how did it appear at that time when you went back to it?
It had not changed.
And what do you mean by that?
They were still on the ground.
Actually, I think what I'll
The
do
whole situation was still the same.
Had there been other changes to the scene? Were there other people in the?
I didn't pay attention to the surroundings of what was going on. I just know that they hadn't moved.
Video, right?
Yes, I was
And-
in and out of looking
But at some
the
point, did you see
screen
other
on my
like citizens in the video?
There, I cannot remember seeing them. I just remembered looking up and seeing that the situation hadn't changed. It had not
Do
changed.
you recall approximately how long that was?
No, it was long enough. It was long enough that I could look back multiple times.
Had there been other changes to the? And so when you did look back, still on the ground, like depicted here essentially.
Correct.
And, and what did you think about this when you looked back and saw that it hadn't changed?
I first asked if the screens had frozen
Why did you ask that?
because it hadn't changed.
Okay. And did you find that it had frozen?
No.
How did
Well, I
you
was
know?
told that it was not frozen.
Did you see the screen change yourself?
Yes, I saw the person's moving.
So what did you start thinking at that point? Still on the ground
Something might be wrong.
here essentially. Why?
We don't get these videos often, or, video at all unless
About
it's
this when you look back and saw
looking
that
at the bridge or just looking at people walking. We very rarely get incidents where police are actively on a scene. And
Did you find that it had frozen?
they had changed. They had come from the back of the squad to the ground, and my instincts were telling me that something's wrong. Something is not right. I don't know what, but something wasn't right.
In what ways were you thinking that something was not right?
It was an extended period of time. Again, I can't tell you the exact amount of time. And they hadn't told me if they needed any more resources. It's a multitude of different things that ran through my brain, but I became concerned that something might be wrong.
Wrong with what? What are you thinking?
It was a gut instinct of, in the incident, something's not going right. Whether it be they needed more assistance, or if there just something wasn't right. I don't know how to explain it. It was a gut instinct to tell me that now we can be concerned.
And what did you decide to do?
I took that